I'm Ryan Pack, and this is Soundtrack Your Life. Welcome to 2023. Today we have Dave Zalatoris from the Beer in Front podcast as our guest today. Welcome, Dave.
Ryan, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, why don't you tell our listeners about Beer in Front?
Beer in Front is getting close to 3 years now that I put it out. I started it right before the pandemic, a couple of weeks before everything shut down. And I just, wanted to talk about, beer and old school beers that, maybe people forget, like here in the Chicago area, it just seems like beer people are chasing the latest hazy IPA or whatever, and they forget about, a beer like a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or an old Rasputin. That's still a great beer, but people tend to forget those while they're chasing the new trendy one. So that was the idea behind the podcast.
Yeah, and I have friends like that in the area. I won't name any names, but I have a buddy who's like Daisy Cutter. That's an old beer. So I listen to your podcast every week. I am a pretty big beer guy myself, and we've swapped some beers just about a month ago.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was. I thank you again because the beer you sent won the award show that I did last week for best craft beer over 21, Pliny the Elder.
Yeah, that's a fantastic beer. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So, so you do episodes every week.
Correct. Yeah, usually I put them out Thursdays.
And you should all check that out. They're nice and short episodes, so for a quick commute or a train ride, it's kind of perfect for that.
Yeah, they're about if it's just me, 20 minutes. If I have a guest, could be about 30 to 45. And then for some beers, I do more in-depth reviews over on YouTube, so you could check that out over there as well.
And what's the URL for the YouTube channel?
I don't have enough subscribers yet for your own URL, so if you just search for Beer in Front on YouTube, you'll find it.
Got it. Perfect. So, if you follow Soundtrack Your Life on Twitter, you'll probably see that I talk to Dave pretty often on Twitter. We talk about beer, we talk about music. So I knew Dave would be a great guest for the podcast. And what are we going to talk about today, Dave?
We're going to talk about my favorite series of all time, The Sopranos, and just the great music that was throughout the whole series, not just the two soundtracks that came out. I think after season 2 and 3, they had a soundtrack out with some of the songs, but throughout all 6 seasons, they were just great music intertwined with, every episode.
Right. Yeah. I haven't seen every episode, but I didn't realize how much music is in the series. And that was a huge, point of David Chase to make sure that that he handpicked a lot of the music.
Yeah, between him and I know there was another music director that I forget off the top of my head. I'm sure Little Steven had some input as well. There were a couple songs from Little Steven that were used, in the series. So I'm sure he was part of it as well. But such great songs up and down from episode 1 all the way to Don't Stop Believin' as the series closed out.
Yeah, it's one of the few shows where I feel like even if you didn't really watch The Sopranos, you know how it begins and you know how it ends musically.
Yeah.
So those two soundtracks that came out, they came out on Playtone Records, which was created by Tom Hanks in That Thing You Do, and then they made it an actual label to release soundtracks, which I think is pretty fun.
Yeah.
I found out that little fact when I was researching the That Thing You Do episode with our podcast buddy Brian Colburn of the Playlist Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess we should start with that first song. So the opening credits song by A3 or the Alabama 3 known outside of the United States. That song's pretty iconic now.
It is. And, I didn't get into The Sopranos until maybe midway through the first season. I, like probably a lot of people, thought, "What is this? A series about opera? No, I'm not gonna watch this." And then, everyone said, "No, you need to watch this. This is great." So, went back and, started watching it, and yeah, that first song from the opening credits, no one knew who Alabama 3 was, when they first heard it. And, it's a catchy song, and, now 20 years later, the song really, fits the series.
Right. Really sets the
Mhm,
tone. It's got Tony driving through New Jersey.
mhm,
I saw this. I remember the Simpsons did a parody of it.
mhm.
So it's that iconic, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that the Simpsons writers are a huge fan of the
Mhm,
show. I know that they've had a bunch of the actors play like mobsters on the show.
mhm.
No James Gandolfini, I don't think though, but
Yeah,
everybody
I don't
else pretty
remember if he
much.
did or not.
But yeah, that song is, if you didn't know it then, you definitely know it now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, from that very first episode. I mean, great tracks on there as, Christopher and Tony were chasing a guy throughout the park. They're playing that Dion and the Belmont song, "I Wonder Why." And a lot of the music, it was almost like in a comedic way, like that track. "I Wonder Why," is they're chasing this guy and, hitting him with the car and, beating living daylights out of the guy. You've got like this peppy Dion and the Belmont song that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I rewatched the pilot today,
Mhm.
and I remember getting a good chuckle out of
Yeah.
that, and and the show definitely still holds up.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't watched a series in full probably in, like, maybe 3 or 4 years, so I think I'm due to do a binge watch of The Sopranos again.
And the show, like its legacy, I think it kind of kicked off what we kind of call the golden age of television,
Yeah.
with the casting and the soundtrack budget as we're talking about.
Mhm.
I think it was really one of the first shows to really invest like serious money. And I think, like shows like, 24, I don't think they would have been able to pull Kiefer Sutherland
Mm.
without, the success of The Sopranos.
Yeah, and even, like, shows like Sons of Anarchy, which had a great music soundtrack as well. I don't think something like that would have happened without The Sopranos.
Yeah, it's kind of the first one to show that you could do something of this quality on TV and people would flock to it.
Yeah, mhm,
So every episode obviously starts with um, the A3 song, Woke Up This Morning, but it ended with the credits with a different song every episode.
mhm. Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, the song that they used at the closing credits was, like, sprinkled throughout the episode. Sometimes it was just a standalone piece, but in many cases, like, that song was just perfect for that episode.
Right. And sometimes it was something very well known, and sometimes it was something pretty obscure.
Mhm,
And one of the great things about the show is it mixed genres, like, we talked about. You got like your little peppy kind of
yeah,
doo-woppy sort of songs. You have a lot of classic rock,
yeah.
but you also had a lot of there was a lot of modern music, at least at the time.
Modern music at the time, and, yeah, they used a lot of, like, 50s rock throughout there, even, like, Andrea Bocelli. They played a lot of Andrea Bocelli. I think more of the earlier, maybe the first half of the season or the, series, I mean, they used a lot of that, and it was perfect. It fit the scene.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of jazz music as well.
Mhm.
So it's pretty cool. And in a specific or in a particular episode, you could get 5 or 6 different genres within 60 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, off the top of my head. I mean, there was one, in season 2, the episode where, Janice, killed her fiancé, Richie. and the ending song for that was not obscure, but it wasn't one of the Eurythmics' biggest hits, "I Saved the World Today," and it was just, at the end, how Tony got rid of the body and all that, and it was like, wow, that's just a perfect song to go with that episode, and everybody knows Annie Lennox's voice, but, yeah, I think that was off their, like, comeback record, so it wasn't a huge hit like, their earlier stuff, but what a great song, what a great finish to that episode.
Yeah. And, when they would pull from a bigger artist, it was rarely like the big hit,
Yeah.
when but whether it was the Stones or like the Kinks,
Mhm.
it wasn't like, you really got me or like I can't get no satisfaction, though I believe that is on the soundtrack.
Mhm. Yeah, like
But that's not how they ended the episode.
no. But, yeah, I think the Rolling Stone songs they used were a Keith Richards song, Through and Through, and then they used Moonlight Mile, so definitely not any hits that the Rolling Stones had.
Yeah. So there were 86 episodes of the show,
Mhm.
I believe, if I can count correctly. Though I guess the last episode technically doesn't have anything over the credits because
Yeah, they're
you get "Don't Stop Believin'" and then you get "Don't Stop,"
yeah.
and then silence.
Yeah, and then it just, went to, like, black, fade to black, and I think everybody was rushing around like, "What happened? Did I lose cable? Did my TiVo run out of space? What happened here?"
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Speaking of this iconic ending, what did you think of it when you first watched it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you go back and forth? Like, how'd you feel about it?
Uh I don't think, when it aired, I initially liked it. I wanted more of, I wanted to see what happened, but I appreciate it more now with the passing of time where, what happened to Tony is, left up to you or left up to the viewer. And, we could all decide what happened, whether we think that, Tony and the family lived or, somebody just gunned them all down.
You're right. Which one do you like to believe?
There's I personally think that he got popped. I don't know about the rest of the family, but I believe that I think the one guy, was he wearing a members only jacket going into like the restroom or something? I don't know if it was like a Godfather or he came out of the bathroom and popped him. Uh, I don't think, he would have taken out the whole family, but I there's the way I picture it is, yeah, he got popped.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, how they use songs kind of in a comedic way to use "Don't Stop Believin'," which everyone kind of
Mm.
equates as kind of a feel-good song.
Yeah.
Perhaps Tony's not gonna feel so good.
Yeah, but it makes everyone, whatever people believe about the ending, that song was right there for it.
Yeah, and they cut that scene specifically knowing they were gonna use that song.
Yeah,
Sometimes they didn't do that, sometimes they would figure out what they wanted to use musically after they shot it, but, scenes like this, you can tell that they had "Don't Stop Believin'" in mind.
yeah. And reading stories how, I think, like, the members of the band Journey had to give approval for it, so I think they saw the last episode before anyone, and then they gave I think Jonathan Cain and Steve Perry gave, the thumbs up, "Yes, go ahead and use it."
Yeah, I think I read that they didn't want some, like, brutal murder scene set
Yeah.
to their song, so it was kinda perfect.
Mhm.
And I think I've read that a couple other times where bands are like, "Well, what are you gonna use it for?"
Yeah, exactly. But no, that was perfect. And, I'm sure, they had a big bump in sales or down, that was what, almost 20 years ago, probably illegal downloads or whatever, Napster downloads. But I'm sure they had a nice bump in sales after that episode because definitely that's all people talked about for weeks was the way it ended.
Yeah, and, everyone knows that song's at the end, and everyone knows that you got the A3 song at the beginning, and how many TV shows can you say about that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I pulled up this article by Screen Rant where they picked out 10 perfect song choices for, the show, and I wanna see, how you feel about these choices.
Okay.
So they have All Through the Night, which was when Tony attends Meadows High School choir concert. And then while Tony is watching it, um, you see two violent acts. First, we see Uncle Junior's goons drag Christopher out to the docks. And then we see Junior himself and his associate Mikey carrying out a hit on Christopher's friend Brendan,
Yeah.
all while this lullaby plays. So, what did you think about? Would that be in your top 10, Dave?
No, that's not. I actually have a list. I think it's about 20. Uh,
Okay.
that is not on my list of like songs that stood out to me. I mean, I remember the episode. I remember, Meadow practicing that song uh, during the episode. But yeah, no, I did not put that on, my list of, songs that jumped out. I didn't want to go through every one of them because I don't think your episodes are that long where we could dissect almost 200 songs.
Right. Well, let's go through some of your favorites and I'll see how many of them match this list.
Uh, the few that I really liked, the opening credits on season 2, where they played Frank Sinatra's "It Was a Very Good Year," when they're doing the opening montage of stuff that happened in season 1. I thought that was very, apropos. Uh, Certain other ones, like they used optimistic voices from The Wizard of Oz. Uh, Dr. Melfi was dreaming about Tony being in an accident. Then you get, the "You're out of the wood." I can't sing it, but the optimistic voices, that was another one was extremely funny to me. And like, oh, well, this actually does fit. Uh, My Lover's Prayer from Otis Redding when Adriana is at Christopher's hospital bed. I'm a huge Otis Redding fan. And that song, like, wow, that fits perfectly. Uh, You're Still the One from Shania Twain when Carmela was waiting for Victor when she was about to have the affair with the house painter. Uh, that song being played really, hit home to me. Uh, I mentioned the Eurythmic song. Uh, the Kinks, the song that they, used wasn't a hit, but Living on a Thin Line, great song from the Kinks. Uh, that was the episode where Tracy, uh, the girl from the Bada Bing, was getting involved with Ralphie. A song that I did not know until I watched the episode, but from Emmylou Harris, Heaven Only Knows. It was the first episode of season 5, and Tony and Carmela they're separated. So just lyrically, the song Heaven Only Knows. So I had to like watch the end credits. Like, it sounds like Emmylou Harris. I'm like, she has a very distinctive voice, but I'm like, yeah, I definitely had to go and download that after that. And that's a song I still put on playlists because it's just a great song. The first song or the first uh, clip in season 3 where they used Peter Gunn and Every Breath You Take, and just how the beats are identical. And you just go back and forth between Peter Gunn as they're wiring up Tony's house. The feds are, having everything under surveillance. And you get like that Peter Gunn law enforcement music, and then just goes into perfectly with, I'll be watching you from the police. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Moonlight Mile from the Stones, great track on there. I don't know why they didn't get the Pink Floyd version, but they used Roger Waters and Van Morrison, which is a great version of Comfortably Numb, when Christopher crashed the car when he was high and then Tony wound up, killing him. That I thought was just brilliant, but it was just weird to me, like, wow, why didn't they use the original? But it still fit.
Sure. My guess is just how expensive it is to license Pink Floyd's music.
Yeah.
Which comes up a lot in my show.
Yeah. And it's, there was a bunch of others, like White Rabbit was in there that worked well.
Mm-hmm.
Boston, we were mentioning classic rock. Boston's More Than a Feeling, as Tony was having a panic attack. Like, well, okay, that's, yes, it's more than a feeling. He's definitely having anxiety and panic disorder. So yeah, those are some of the ones that really like stuck out to me, like as I was going through my list, like, oh, I need to check this one off. I need to check this one off here.
Yeah, and, Living on a Thin Line and the Peter Gunn Every Breath You Take mashup were both mentioned on this list,
Hmm.
which I would assume that most Sopranos fans would probably point to those 2 songs as well.
Hmm. Yeah, great. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to dig out my iPod to get that song again, that mashup.
Yeah. So what do you think about I feel like the Stones are in a lot of, like, mafia sort of
Yeah,
soundtracks.
a lot of Martin Scorsese films.
Yeah, and I know Scorsese's a huge fan, like, he did that, Stones documentary too, but what is it about the Stones that you feel fits in so well with the mob?
Uh, and a lot of it was like that era of the Stones. So it wasn't the early stuff. It was that 67 to maybe 72 range where you had Altamont going on. They were just dark, the bad boys of rock and roll. I mean, the one song that they used through and through, the Keith Richards song, came out in '94, I believe. But most of the music that is in mob shows or mob movies of them seems to be in that era where, I mean, you had darker songs like Midnight Rambler. Uh, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that Martin Scorsese has used, but like Moonlight Mile from The Sopranos, I thought was just a really good song to use. That was a closing credit on season 6, episode 12.
And what do you think about, the pop choices that they used in the show? You know, the quote "modern music," the stuff that was current when the show was, being produced.
It was really good. Like Meadow when she was singing No Scrubs, which was popular at the time with I forget what her friend's name was at the time, but they're bouncing around, singing No Scrubs. And I think she was singing another song with her friend, but she was big into music. Didn't she walk around with like the Rembrandt shirt, I think, or something like that? So she was,
Right.
big into music. Uh, Obviously, Tony was. I remember him bringing the boombox to his mother with, you know, old Italian songs that were on there. So, I mean, I think everyone loved music. I think the modern songs just fit. Older people like me might not have known them, but looking back 20 years later, you're like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Right, and I think that's part of the, kind of what the show wanted to do, like, kinda represent these 2 worlds, right? So
Hmm.
you have all this classic rock and, Italian music and kind of just older stuff to kinda make the show feel timeless,
Yeah.
but then you have all this pops, Meadows listening to all this current music, so it also puts you in a specific time period.
Yeah.
And, the show is about him, the first scene is him in a psychiatrist's office,
Yeah.
and it kind of shows, like, this is gonna be a kind of an interesting take on the mafia, right?
Hmm.
It's not just gonna be about, whacking people.
Yeah.
It's kind of showing, like, the 2 sides of Tony, and then the music, I think, kind of does that too, like, the kind of pop stuff is like, this is what his domestic life looks like versus when he's running down people with his car.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like the music with his mother and, you know, uh, I mean, they played a lot of like stuff from the '50s throughout there. A lot of Frankie Valli, who was in an episode himself. The Dion song that we mentioned earlier. But there were a lot of early '50s, rock and roll and early '60s before the British invasion.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the fun cameos in the show. I think, offline we were talking about, Little Stevie,
Yeah,
who is a who's a character. He's not, they use some of his music, but he also is in the show.
yeah. They used a couple songs from him, and it wasn't a song on there, but one of the funniest parts to me in the whole series run was, I think I have it written down here, in season 5, where Christopher is late. He comes to the Bada Bing or where Satriel's, I forget where, and they're asking him where he was, and Christopher belts out a line from Born to Run. He's like, "Oh, the highway was jammed with broken heroes on a last chance power drive." And if you didn't know Bruce Springsteen or Born to Run, you're like, all right, but I started cracking up when I heard that. It's like, you know, little Steven's right there, and he's just saying this line from Born to Run. I just thought was hysterical.
Yeah. And you can't have a show set in Jersey without a Springsteen reference,
Yeah.
right?
You know, I thought because Springsteen, I think, is half Italian. I thought like maybe he would have a cameo or something, but no, he never did.
Well, I guess we'll settle for little Stevie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who plays Silvio Dante,
Hmm.
which is as Italian as you can make a name sound.
Yes. With some nice hair, too. He had some nice hair going there.
Also, Steve Buscemi was has a great role on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a great part. And I think even before he was on as an actor, he directed a few episodes as well.
He's always down to get whacked
Yes.
or fed into a wood
Mhm.
chipper. He's got a knack for these things.
Have you ever listened to the podcast Talking Sopranos?
I have not.
That one's really good. That came out about pandemic time, and it's just um, Michael Imperioli and I can't think of the guy's name, but the actor who played Bacala, Steven Sherpa. And each episode of the podcast is an episode. They just talk about an episode of the show from start to finish. And they have some of the actors on who were in The Sopranos. That was excellent podcast. And they also talk about like the music that was used too, where the Michael Imperioli, I think he's more knowledgeable about music, but he also discussed like every song that was in an episode. But yeah, Talking Sopranos is a great podcast.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
And we should mention that Tony Sirico,
Yeah.
is that how do you pronounce it? Tony Sirico passed away this year.
Yeah. That was sad. And that was such an iconic character. And it was almost like not real. It's like almost like a cartoon character. Nobody could be that bizarre. But what a great character.
Oh, and I think Paul Herman also passed away this year.
Yeah.
What a bummer.
Yeah.
They are getting whacked by natural causes.
Yeah. Not a good year for people in mafia movies.
I know. We just did an episode talking about James Caan.
Yeah. James Caan and, what's his name from Goodfellas passed away earlier in the year. Ray Liotta.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah.
We're losing a lot of good ones, but so did you know who James Gandolfini was before The Sopranos, or were you familiar with his work?
I mean, I think of that whole cast. I knew who Edie Falco was, obviously little Steven, but you didn't know him as an actor. You knew him as a musician. And Dr. Melfi. Those were really the only people that you knew. I didn't know who James Gandolfini was. Now, I saw some of his work after the fact, but yeah, he was what a great act. I mean, no one could have played that part but him. It was like he was born to play it. He was perfect for that role.
I agree. Yeah, but I feel like because I think he was kind of known as a character actor before then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great casting choice, and I think, like I think we said earlier, it really opened the door for, I don't want to call it more serious actors, but maybe bigger names to come to TV.
Yeah.
So maybe, Bryan Cranston doing Breaking Bad and stuff like that. I think that is all part of James Gandolfini's legacy.
Yeah. And he was so good at this likable anti-hero, if you will. Because really, I mean, Tony wasn't a nice person. I mean, he killed people, cheated on his wife. I mean, he wasn't a nice guy, but Gandolfini made him a likable character.
Yeah, and I think that definitely The Sopranos definitely kicked off the whole, like, anti-hero sort of drama,
Yeah.
like I said, with Breaking Bad and, like, Mad Men.
Hmm.
We had these very flawed heroes who you should hate, but you also kind of are rooting for,
Yeah. You were rooting for him to make it out of the restaurant in the last scene.
even though he kind of deserved it.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the songs that you may have, like I know you said the Emmylou Harris song
Hmm.
you went and found out afterwards. Um, are there any other artists or songs that, the show really turned you on to?
Uh, Not really. I mean, a lot of the ones, I liked. I mean, they used some uh older Elvis Costello. I mean, I went back to revisit like those albums. They used a good Bob Dylan song, Return to Me, that I was not aware of. So, I mean, Bob Dylan, everybody knows Bob Dylan's voice. It's so distinctive, but I'm like, oh, I need to, check this record out. And I think that with a lot of artists, with a lot of songs that were in there, you're like, wow, this is really good. Let me hear some more of them.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's part of the brilliance of them using kind of these deep cuts.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, it's familiar, but I don't know why. And then
Hmm.
and it's before where you can just hold your phone up to the TV and find out who it's by.
Yeah. We didn't have Shazam back then or whatever. Yeah. What song is this?
So you would actually have to, you know, watch the credits at the end and be like, "What
Yeah.
song was that?"
And you hope your TiVo didn't run out.
Yeah, or that you could actually read it on your TV
Yeah.
because the text was so small.
Yeah. No, it was like Bruce Springsteen, like they used an obscure track of his, State Trooper, which from the Nebraska record, which I like the record, but that's not an album that most people associate with Bruce Springsteen. So I'm sure that brought a lot of people, oh, let me, check out this.
Right. Yeah, like Nebraska's a record that I feel like is for like the hardcore music fans.
Yeah.
And I think it's gotten like a new appreciation recently, but it's not, if you ask 100 people on the street, like, what's your favorite Bruce Springsteen album or name a Bruce Springsteen album, like maybe 5 people say
Yeah.
Nebraska. So here's a fun question for you, Dave. So
Okay.
if Tony Soprano was a real person and said, "Hey, Dave, you're the Chicago beer guy. Give me a beer. What beer are you going to drink with Tony Soprano?"
What beer am I going to drink with Tony Soprano? Well, he smoked a lot of cigars, so I'm gonna probably give him a barrel aged. I'll probably have to give him like Death Star from Revolution. Uh, Give him something dark like that. Tony Soprano doesn't strike me as a hazy New England IPA guy. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't want to stereotype him, but yeah, he doesn't strike me as you know, smelling the melon notes from the double dry hop. So I think he'd be more of a bourbon barrel aged stout. So I'd probably have to go with either the Goose Island Bourbon County brand stout with a cigar or like Death Star from Revolution.
No Italian Pilsner?
Oh, I do love a good Italian Pilsner, but there's really no one here that puts them out regularly. I mean, they're just like an offshoot where they'll be out for a limited run and gone. So I can't think of any Chicago area brewer that puts it out year round. And I wish they would. It's one of my favorite styles, like that and a Vienna lager I love.
Yeah, but I think you're right that since he does smoke so many cigars that he's
Yeah.
not going to want like a fruity beer or a
Yeah.
light beer.
Yeah. Did they drink beer like early on when they were doing like the barbecues? I mean, he might have had, a macro. I'm trying to remember, like, early on in the series, like he was always out at a barbecue. He was, cooking on the grill. So he might have had something light. But if we were to come and we're just going to sit down somewhere, I would have to go with a barrel aged stout for Tony Soprano.
Yeah, but not like a pastry one.
No, no, I don't. I don't see him. drinking a lot of adjunct. So I think we'll just have to go with the basic bourbon stout.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, it would either be an Italian Pilsner or it'd have to be like something kind of on the whiskey side, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, very cool, Dave.
Yeah.
So, what do you have planned for the rest of 2023 for Beer in Front, or what are some of your big plans? Obviously, I don't expect you to have the whole year mapped out, but
No, I want to do a little bit more. Hoping to have you on in the new year, and we could talk the Cicerone program.
oh yeah, for sure.
I want to. There's another podcaster out there, Dr. Doris Forte. She runs a podcast called The Visionarium, and she was talking to me about maybe doing like cooking segments with beer. So she gave me a recipe for a stew that is made with Guinness. So I'm going to try that, and I'll have her on probably sometime after the new year, and we'll talk about that and post the link to the recipe. I found a recipe for. It was a pork tenderloin with an IPA. It was marinated in an IPA with a chimichurri that looked like really good. So that's something like that. I probably will do those maybe once every couple months, maybe once a quarter, to do a cooking segment. I just had the Beer in Front Awards last week that was very successful. So I want to do that again and judge more, old school beers. And, this year it was just macros. I think next year I'm going to do maybe light beers or imports as well as craft beers that are 21. And I just want to get out more to different breweries and places, bottle shops, talk to people there. When I started the show, the pandemic hit and you really couldn't do anything for a year and a half. And, I want to get back out there and, talk to people outside of a computer screen.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What are your social media handles if people want to follow Beer in Front?
I'm pretty much everywhere at Beer in Front. I don't know, like Twitter's the main one that I use, but lately I don't know if I'm going to use Twitter as much for, personal reasons with the owner. But I'm everywhere else, Mastodon. I have a Discord server if anyone is interested, Beer in Front. I'm on Instagram, TikTok. So pretty much anywhere, just search for Beer in Front and you can find me.
Perfect. And you can find us at soundtrack_your on Twitter, if Twitter is still a thing by the time this episode comes out. We're on Instagram at soundtrackcast. We have a post news account if that becomes the new thing.
Yeah, I think I signed up for that too, just to lock the name in.
Yeah. And I think we're Soundtrack Cast on that. But yeah, it was great talking to you, Dave. I will definitely return the favor and talk beer with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ryan. It's fun. I mean, we've been talking about this for, months now, getting together for the Sopranos.
Yeah, and I'm glad we finally got to do it. That was my bad. The last half of the year kind of got away from me.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Things happen.
But yeah, I will definitely see you online. I'm sure we'll talk more beer and more music in the new year. Have a happy holiday, even though this is coming out in 2023.
Yeah. You do the same. It's always fun. I love listening to your show. Thank you so much for having me. I really, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank you for supporting the podcast on Patreon.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You as well.
Thank you.
Patreon supporters of each other here. Yeah.
Yeah. So have a good rest of your day. And I'll let you know when this is coming out.
Sounds good, Ryan. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.